Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing tonight? All right, good. Welcome to the City of Coconut Creek's Ambassador Program. It's a pleasure to see you here, so many of you here again. I'm Karen Brooks, and I'm the city manager of this beautiful city. We also have in the room tonight our entire city commission. We have Mayor Josh Rydell in the back room there. We have Vice Mayor Sandy Welch. We have Commissioner Becky Tooley. I know I saw her.
She's over there.
Over on the other side over there, okay. And we have Commissioner Jackie Raley. And we have Commissioner John Brody.
Oh, you gotta be loud on that.
Okay, so this is our second Ambassador Program meeting. Last month we had a meeting on emergency management that was very successful, and we had a lot of participants. How many of you were here at the last meeting last month? Oh, fantastic. It's great to see you all here again. And thank you for coming. In case any of you who are here tonight missed it, we do have the video and the PowerPoint presentation from that meeting on our website under Ambassador Program, so just search that. So the purpose of the Ambassador Program, for those of you who have not attended a meeting yet, is to engage our residents on issues of importance to the city, open a conversation with the community and our ambassadors, and provide our ambassadors, all of you, with tools and information to take back to your fellow residents. At each meeting is an hour, so that's why we really need to get these started on time. And there's time set aside at the end for you to talk with our commissioners and staff and gather materials to also take back to your communities. Tonight's topic is on the proposed expansion of the Turnpike. Adaptive and progressive mobility is one of the 5 key areas of focus in our recently adopted Vision 2030 plan, so we know that it is something that is very important to our community. Talks of expansion on the Turnpike have been going on for several years, particularly in this area. And while the Turnpike is not within our jurisdiction to control, the entire length of the Turnpike borders our city. So we want to do everything that we can to mitigate any negative impacts of any expansion. Tonight we're going to share some information to help you know the history of what's been going on. It's been going on since the early 2000s. The parts of it the city is concerned about, and how our community can be impacted. Following the meeting, we have tables at the back with handouts for you to take back to your community. Our commissioners and staff will be sticking around, so if you want to talk to them and ask questions and get information, please feel free to do so. There's also a parking lot, which is an easel board in the back, set up so that if you have any suggestions for future topics or any questions or any issues you would like us to be aware of, please just take a sticky note and let us know. And then there's a commission meeting that begins at 7 o'clock in case you want to stick around and learn a little bit more about what's going on in the city tonight. At the end of the presentation, we have the presentation, and at the end, we will open it up for questions and comments. So if you could just please hold off until we get through the presentation, that would be really helpful. And with that, I'm going to introduce our wonderful presenters tonight. We have 3 of our staff. We have Deputy City Manager and Interim Public Works Director Sheila Rose. We have Director of Sustainable Development Scott Staudemeyer. And we have Senior Project Manager for Planning, Michael Rigetti. Take it away.
Thank you, Karen. I'm going to try to speak loud, but I'm also kind of referencing some slides here, and I'd like to draw your attention back and forth. Many of you know that major highway construction is handled by the Florida Department of Transportation, or FDOT, which we'll be using acronyms throughout tonight's presentation, but when we talk about major highways, they're handled by the Florida Department of Transportation. And unique to the Florida Department of Transportation are those facilities that are toll operated. So the Florida Turnpike and the Sawgrass Expressway are those 2 toll facilities that are under the jurisdiction of FDOT, but they're handled by the Turnpike Authority. So when we talk about the Turnpike Authority, we're talking about the Turnpike that runs along our east-west border, along our north-south border, and the Sawgrass Expressway that bisects the city. We all know that South Florida is growing, and with growth comes traffic congestion. It's inevitable. we know that Florida's Turnpike is going to be widened. We know that the Sawgrass Expressway is going to be widened. And what we're doing tonight is bringing to you the information so that you can get involved in the process to help you develop a more thorough understanding of the process, so that when we make comments to our agency representatives, to our elected officials, we do it with an understanding of the process and the timeliness with those comments need to be offered, so that we really are effective in impacting what's proposed. I'm going to operate my own slides, so if we need to go back and forth, I apologize.
Closer to the right. No.
I think I can put it up like this. Is that better?
Yes.
Man, I thought I was talking loud. So Florida's Turnpike's been around for a long, long time. But the process for expansion and improvement to Florida's Turnpike and the Sawgrass Expressway follows a fairly rigid process. They start with a planning horizon, which is a 20-year study where the DOT looks at the traffic analysis and determines what they project to be the needs in 20 years. For instance, when we're talking about the planning horizon for the Sawgrass Expressway and Florida's Turnpike, we're for the most part talking about the year 2040. I don't know about you, but time has changed, technology has changed, things are moving at a much more rapid pace. I mean, who would have thought that a car could park itself 10 years ago? My car parks itself. Autonomous vehicles are the future. We're all, if you're buying a car that is 2017 or later, it has autonomous features. Those are some of the issues that we are hoping to bring to bear so that we make sure that Florida's Turnpike, when they're considering expansions, are weaving into those traffic considerations the latest technology. The next step in the planning process is what's called a PD&E study. And a PD&E study is the federal process that shows compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act. And the key components of the National Environmental Policy Act are that any federal agency that is doing a major project must consider the environmental impacts. And when they say environmental impacts, they don't just mean the birds, the bunnies, the water quality. They mean, does it impact your property values? Does the noise keep you up at night? Are the air quality impacts ruining your kids' future lives? Are we impacting a community, such as Winmore, that might be an age-restricted community more overtly than a neighboring community? So those are all what are considered environmental impacts. And the Florida Department of Transportation is required to evaluate those impacts throughout this public involvement process. So let me go back and give you a little bit of history. FDOT, the Turnpike version of it, started a study of the Turnpike expansion in 2005, and they completed that in 2006. As part of this study, they did that whole environmental analysis. And there are reports that are thick. They have noise analyses, wetland impacts. It covers the gamut of the issues. For an alternative that was 8 lanes. Right now the Turnpike's 6 lanes. So the proposal was to add 1 lane on both sides. They had the public hearings, they got public comment. They even approached residents in the communities of South Creek, Sunshine Drive, and Winmore and asked them to sign petitions encouraging the DOT to install noise walls. It was a fait accompli. They were building this project. It had gone through the approval process, and everything was fine. An 8-lane alternative really added basically 1 lane on both sides of the roadway. This is the typical section that was proposed at the time. And you'll see what it basically does is it spans the expansion on both sides of the roadway. So it isn't a wonderful thing if you're concerned about traffic noise. I know South Creek in particular, they're already experiencing significant noise, but it wasn't huge. It did provide for the construction of noise walls. which many people in the community thought were a huge benefit. So those noise walls were something that came packaged with this 8-lane alternative. So as part of this process, FDOT went from the PD&E study now into the formal engineering design. And what did they find? You see these two big red lines on the graphic? Those are the two gas pipelines. They found those gas pipelines and they realized, originally I think they thought they could probably get very near to them with the expansion, it wouldn't be a problem. There was a big lawsuit, about 10 years worth of litigation, and the Turnpike Authority lost. The gas company won, and they created a settlement that required that the Turnpike stay a certain distance away from those gas pipelines, which resulted in a new design. And a new design that completely skipped that entire public involvement process that I was speaking about earlier. It skipped that process where they went out to the community, they asked for that public input. And instead of an 8-lane alternative, which is, remember, 1 lane on both sides, they came back with a 10-lane alternative because they were using that more future planning horizon. But that 10-lane alternative shifted everything to the west side to stay away from these gas pipelines. They didn't even consider putting 1 lane on that side and 3 lanes on the other. They shifted it all to the west. Well, we're to the west. Seems like it wasn't all that fair. The city got involved. And we met with the Turnpike representatives. Very, very concerned. We expressed not only did we think that they had violated their own process by skipping these public hearings and this public involvement process where they sought your input, that they violated our due process. So we met with the Turnpike executives, and they were open to restarting that study, which is what we're doing now. So they are right now in the midst of what's been a 3-year PD&E study, which should culminate in a public hearing. We expect that public hearing, and Scott will go into that in more detail, to be at the first quarter of 2023. But we want everybody to be involved and engaged and know how this process goes so that when we present at the public hearing, we make rational recommendations for improvements. We also did something fairly significant, and this is just to show you that the city's engaged. We're following this at every turn. We approached the Metropolitan Planning Organization. That's the group that provides for transportation funding for the whole area. The MPO saw our concerns and actually pulled the funding from the project. So we have got a little bit of an ace in the hole. Right now, this project is not funded. We know something needs to happen, but what we're doing tonight is engaging you so that when we engage with the Turnpike, we do it effectively and we get a project that we can all live with for the long term. We also think that it's important that we not only look at the construction impacts, that we also look at the long-term impacts. If they're building a road that is overbuilt, it'll only result in overcapacity conditions on our regional network. Sample Road, right now is already almost 8 lanes in many locations. Do we want it to be 10 or 12? I don't think so. Those are the kind of ramifications that we need to watch out for. So we're going to talk about engaging with our elected officials. So before I turn it over to Michael, who's going to give you a big picture view of all of the projects in the area, I just want to caution you. This weekend, the Sample Road Interchange is going to be closed. The Turnpike's working out there. So I just bring that to your attention. We'll get back to that during the question and answer, but I didn't want to go past tonight and not bring that to your attention. So I'm going to turn it to Michael. We'll all be here to answer questions afterwards and let him do the more technical deep dive into these various projects. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Sheila.
There you go.
I like the music, right? Yeah. So, distinguished guests, ambassadors. My name is Michael Rigetti, Senior Project Manager. I want to try to spend a few minutes with you to educate you on what is happening. Sheila gave us a great overview on how we got to this point, and I want to give you some information on what's happening with some of these projects. In Broward County, as Sheila had addressed, we're seeing growth not only here in South Florida, but population projections that are forcing DOT to have projects either in the PD&E process, in the design process, or in the soon-to-be construction phase. And so a number of these projects are outlined here on this screen. We've all driven on the Turnpike. That's project number 1 that's on the list. Sheila talked about the potential widening the Turnpike with 4 additional lanes. Second project is the Sawgrass Interchange with the Turnpike. The third and fourth projects relate to the huge project for Deerfield and Pompano Beach on the Southwest 10th Street connector and the connection out to 995. And then the Sawgrass Expressway, essentially from Coral Springs all the way down to 595, will also be widened from an existing 6-lane condition to a 10-lane alternative, which is what they're proposing. So I'd like to get into some of that, more specifically on these adjacent projects that are really going to have an impact here. And there's 2 projects. The first 2 projects are really the first 2 projects that I want you to focus on. And I'm going to go over each one of those in a little bit of detail. And the first project is the Turnpike Widening, and I want to try to give an overview of what's happening and how that's going to affect, essentially, our community. So Sheila had mentioned that as part of the PD&E process, there's actually 3 alternatives proposed for the widening. First alternative would be a shift to the west. Second alternative would be a center line widening, and then the third alternative would be a shift to the east. So the preferred alternative, number 1, is something that would have obviously a huge effect on our city. So I'd like to take a look at that just a little bit closer. And you can see, if I can use this pointer. So here's essentially the limits of where they would not be doing any work. This is an existing condition of where the Turnpike travel lanes currently reside. Everything that they're showing here, these additional 4 lanes would shift further over, closer to Windmore, South Creek, Sunshine Drive, in this area. So if you live in these areas, these would be potentially either with noise, additional traffic, environmental impacts, could be essentially part of the equation of what could be impacted with your neighborhood. And Sheila had mentioned it also a little bit, but in more specific detail, if we put, or DOT puts, 4 additional lanes of traffic on Turnpike, so if you go from 6 lanes to 10 lanes, that's thousands of cars additionally a day that are going to have access to Atlantic Boulevard's exit, Coconut Creek Parkway's exit, Sample Road's exit, access to the Sawgrass, and affecting our community with additional traffic on Lyons Road, Copens Road. And so our local commute of trying to get back and forth just to run an errand or get to a job or go to a restaurant, we may not live in those communities that I just highlighted that would be in proximity to the Turnpike, but you will see the effects of the additional traffic essentially accessing our streets here in Coconut Creek. Regarding the noise, they are proposing a wall, but the wall has certain height restrictions and performance issues as it relates to the wall. The wall is not a comprehensive solution. It does not prevent 100% of the noise from being rebounded as a barrier. So if you live in Sunshine Drive or in South Creek or in Windmore, there's a really good chance that you're going to have a significant impact as it relates to noise. So began my part of the presentation with talking about some of the projects in the area. Second project I wanted to focus on was the interchanges. So along the Turnpike itself, in the next 3 to 5 years, there are construction plans for improvements at Coconut Creek Parkway, Atlantic Boulevard, and at Sample Road. Staff has had an opportunity to review some of the preliminary plans. Although the plans are not final, we generally don't have any major concerns on those intersection improvements. However, the fourth project of an intersection improvement that's planned is the Sawgrass Expressway. And that project does raise some issues for our community. So again, project 2, the Sawgrass Interchange, what is being proposed and what would be affected. So this is a limited aerial rendering showing a draft version of what the interchange would look like. Unfortunately, it doesn't resolve some of the access problems that currently exist today. Anybody who's traveled on the Sawgrass or on the Southwest 10th Street and tried to get full access to the Turnpike, you know those restrictions on how you cannot get to all 4 legs of going westbound 10th Street and getting full access to the Turnpike, either northbound or southbound. The 10th Street project has limitations. There are 2 roadways in that 10th Street project. There's a local portion of the 10th Street project, and there's an express portion of the 10th Street project. Neither one of those provide access southbound onto the Turnpike. They are providing a northbound ramp, but not a southbound ramp. And so what does that do to the city of Coconut Creek? Unfortunately, what they're considering is having the traffic continue past the Turnpike, go to a portion that would be close to or near Lyons Road, and then do a U-turn in order to go back eastbound on the Sawgrass to connect to southbound Turnpike. That would require additional truck traffic and additional daily volume of trips of having that particular turning movement as opposed to having a ramp that would have a direct access connection. That affects a whole host of communities, including our SOS Children's Village, potentially Callaway Park, Cocoa Bay, and Cocoa Lakes, because they're proposing to build ramps in order to make this type of a flyover connection onto the Turnpike. So we've been asking, as part of their PD&E process, to have full access to this particular facility, but at this point, they have not provided that type of a full access scenario. And the height of the ramps, we're talking about structures that would be anywhere between 40 and 55 feet tall with no noise barrier, right? There's no sound wall that's going to be on a ramp. They're going to need to illuminate those ramps. So the ramps are going to need to be lighted. So if you live in that area, you may see streetlights that you currently do not have in your backyard. So with respect to impacts on the Sawgrass Turnpike Interchange project, again, the potential impacts are with traffic, lighting, and noise pollution. So again, thank you for coming out tonight. I'm going to turn it over now to Scott to talk about what's next and as ambassadors, what you can do to help us as city staff moving forward with this project. Thank you very much.
Sure. Good evening. I get the fun part, actually, because I get to talk to you directly about what the ambassadors can do to help us keep an eye on these projects. So, everybody hear me, Aaron? Okay. So, what is the city doing, and what can you do as our ambassadors? 3 key terms to keep in mind. Monitor, stay informed, engage. I think you've heard through Sheila's presentation and Michael's presentation, you have to stay on top of these things, you have to monitor these things, and you have to stay engaged. So what the city is doing is what the city has been doing, and what the city will continue to do. We're going to continue to meet with the Turnpike executive team. We're going to continue to try to work through and come to a reasonable alternative for this project. I believe it's either later this month or sometime in August, we actually have another meeting with the Turnpike executive team. We're also going to closely monitor the Turnpike website and project updates. This website does not change very often, but ironically, in advance of tonight's meeting, this week, the project schedules for both the projects that we're talking about tonight were updated on their websites, and we had to change some slides just to provide fresh information. So we do need to keep an eye on these websites, and we do need to pay attention. You've also heard Sheila talk about meetings with stakeholders. You know, the Broward County Metropolitan Planning Organization. They have a huge stake in this project, and of course, we are constantly engaged with that organization. But it's not just agencies. You know, you've heard Michael talk about the limits of the Turnpike project going all the way down to 595. You know, there are other municipalities that are affected by this project, by this widening. And we need to engage with Davie, and we need to engage with Oakland Park and those municipalities that abut the Turnpike to get them engaged, to hear what their problems are with this project as well. And at the right time, we need to engage our elected officials. And I'm not talking about our elected officials, our city commissioners. They're engaged. They're here tonight. They know about this, and they've been following this, and they are 100% in to make sure that we get the best possible alternative for any of these projects. We're talking about county commissioners, talking about state representatives, state senators. We need to engage with these levels of elected officials so that they can hear our voice. And we will do that. One of the things that makes it very difficult to stay on top of projects like this and continue to follow projects like this is the length of time these projects take. I will tell you that, you know, the different phases seem to drag on and on and on. So this is actually the timeline that is on the Turnpike's website for what we call Project 1, the Turnpike Widening. And it recently changed. But you can see that the PD&E study that Sheila was referring to began back in March of 2019. Of course, this is the second PD&E study for this project. So it's really been going on since 2005, 2006. The public kickoff meeting in November of 2019. That was held at Broward College at the Junior Achievement Building. Well attended. I mean, we had a great showing, and we really, I think they heard us loud and clear at that meeting. It was a great opportunity. It was in our backyard, and we took full advantage of it. Flash forward to the public information meeting in January of this year. So the Turnpike, in their infinite wisdom, or I guess in an effort to be fair, you know, they pushed that meeting to the south end of the project limits, and that was in Davie at the Signature Grant, not in our backyard, and we had a much harder time getting the community engaged. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity to hear that story, because as ambassadors, that's where you could really help, because we had a good showing for where the project was located, but it was nowhere near the enthusiasm that we had at the public kickoff meeting in 2019. And the other part of talking about stakeholders and other municipalities, you know, for a public information meeting that was held in Davie, Coconut Creek by far had the greatest representation there. There was very few other cities represented there the way we were represented. And this timeline, of course, as Sheila mentioned, and this is one of the updates that occurred this week, they've now pushed the public hearing to the first quarter in 2023. We don't have a specific date for that meeting yet, but when we have it, you will have it. And we will be asking you to come to that meeting and asking you to get your neighbors to come to that meeting because it is one of the final opportunities you'll have to try to have some real meaningful input. And of course, they're showing the study as being complete in the third quarter of 2023. And then they would move on to design and construction. One of the things I wanted to mention is that right now, the only thing that is ongoing and the only thing that is funded is the PD&E study. The design of this project is not funded. The construction of this project is not funded. However, one more thing that we need to keep an eye on is every year, the Turnpike program, work program, comes out. They make decisions on what gets funded for design, what gets funded for construction. Now, there's input from other agencies on that, as Sheila mentioned. But again, something else that we need to keep our eye on in terms of when this construction gets funded, because we'll have a real idea of what their timeline is. Sort of the same thing with the Sawgrass Expressway Project 2 timeline. Again, started back in 2016. You know, they sort of lull you to sleep with these lengthy gaps in activity. The public kickoff was in November of 2016. Just now, again, another update on their website this past week. They've now set a public alternatives meeting for the first quarter of 2023. Don't have a specific date for that, but again, when we know it, you will know it. And then they have this, again, drawn out for public hearings in the third quarter of 23 and the study complete in 24. In this instance, the design for this project is funded, however, construction is not. But we will continue to keep an eye on the work programs that comes out on an annual basis, and we will share that information as we get it. So what can you do as ambassadors? What is one of the smartest things that you could do right now for us is to educate yourself. I will tell you that the Turnpike website is a valuable resource. We use it, the residents can use it. You know, just because we don't like some of their projects doesn't mean that their information is not very valuable. It is very valuable, and we rely on it. And if we have questions, we ask them of their staff. But on this website, they have great project background information. They have study area graphics. They have videos to accompany some of those study area graphics, schedule information, which I've already highlighted, and a lot of relevant documents that you would find interesting, environmental studies, noise studies, lots of attachments in the website that would arm you with information and enable you to ask some really good questions when we get to the public hearing stages and we get to design alternative stages where you have an opportunity to be heard. Perhaps one of the most important things on the website is the contact information. So Jaslyn and Rax are project managers for both of the projects, for the Turnpike Widening project and the Sawgrass project. For now, that could change. Again, we have to monitor the website. That could change, but these two folks are the contacts, listed contacts for both the projects that we're talking about tonight. And that information is on this screen, is on a handout in the back of the room. So I hope you will take one before you leave. And of course, we'll share this information on our website as well. But it also has the direct links to the specific project web pages for those projects where you will find a lot of that valuable information that I'm talking about. And at the right time, as I had mentioned earlier, we need to engage our elected officials. And again, not our very engaged city commission. They are there. They are in it. But, you know, Mark Bogan is your county commissioner. Tina Scott-Polsky is your state senator. Christine Hunchofsky is your state representative. These are the folks that we need to be engaging with and making sure they hear our voices and making sure that they know that we are concerned about these projects and that we want the best possible alternative out of the DOT and the Turnpike as possible. So that's how, as ambassadors, you can help the city. Stay engaged and stay informed. And how can you stay informed? Well, of course, we have Heads Up Creek, coconutcreek.net/heads up. Great information on a lot of different things, but we do have specific information on the Turnpike project. We have a number of social media opportunities to be connected with. And again, that information is on that slide, or on that handout in the back. So everything that I'm showing you is on a one-page, double-sided handout that I think you'll find very valuable. And before I get to questions, I just want to send out a reminder that I believe what we have September 8th is the next ambassador meeting where we will be talking about the history of Coconut Creek. We'll be in this room, same time, same place. All right, so we are at the questions portion of our presentation. And yes, sir.
Can you flip up the slide of the Turnpike and Sawgrass?
I'll get there a little bit. That one?
No, the other. You went. Go forward. There you go.
Okay.
Explain to me why the existing entrance onto the Turnpike going both north and south isn't doable.
field that one. He is our resident expert. Hi, good evening. The question was, why isn't the north and south access to the turnpike doable? So it's an excellent question, one that we posed to the PD&E group, right? We think you can engineer it, or it could happen, but there's, if you look at the existing conditions, they seem to feel that there's restrictions in some park land that they would have to either access over. So land acquisition is an issue. You've got to understand they're dealing with communities that have been developed around the turnpike, and now the turnpike, this particular project, I think the Southwest 10th Street connector, which is a separate PD&E, separate construction project, and is funded to go into construction soon. It's already past the design phase, it's in the construction phase. And the Turnpike Sawgrass Interchange need to be harmonized. And we've been asking for them to do that on a regular basis. But there's some land constraints, and we're still advocating for an appropriate interchange scenario that would have full access at all four legs of the Turnpike / Sawgrass / 10th Street connector to change what anybody who uses that area knows that even in this existing condition, you have restrictions of getting from one facility to the other facility without having to navigate and do U-turns, right? So the answers in so many words is, I think they're using the excuse of cost and funding of acquisition of land that doesn't belong to the turnpike. So when they can work within their own right-of-way, that's an easier design build type of facility.
But the question I'm asking is, we live in the north end of the state, all the way north. And if we want to get onto the turnpike, we just go fly right onto it. Yes, SOS is right there, okay? But there's a wall up, and I just can't comprehend putting a 40-foot flyover.
Yeah, so again, the question was, how do we access the turnpike? We saw some drawings that showed the ramp generally beginning back in this leg, because you have to understand this ramp has to elevate up.
Forget the ramp. I mean, coming in from Lyons Road,
Right.
and you just curve around and you go southbound, okay, to get onto the turnpike.
That will remain as part of their design. That access point currently exists and would be part of their proposal that they're suggesting. The issue that the city has is the other direction. If you're going from Southwest 10th Street, okay.
Well, let's do one thing at a time. But if we're going east, and I want to get on the turnpike to go north,
Yes.
you just swing around and go straight north on it.
But they're changing that profile because these additional ramps would be new if you're going northbound to get onto Southwest 10th Street. So this clover leaf that you see here would be modified. So that loop around to go northbound is now going to be modified.
So Michael, let me weigh in on that, just very quickly. Just very quickly, and these are the kind of questions that we're hoping you're thinking about. And the appropriate time to ask these questions is at these public meetings with the Turnpike. We'll certainly take your comments and carry those forward, but we need you engaged in asking those kind of questions at these public meetings. The city is not responsible for the design. We're raising red flags where we see concerns, where we see a proposal that provides for a Texas U-turn. And if you've ever been to Costco at University Drive and I-595 and you see the ramps that go underneath the expressway, what we're doing is raising the red flag about those concerns. What we need you to be doing is looking in detail at these proposals and showing up when we call out and say, hey, we're all going to the signature grant. It's time for you to put your comments on the record so that the Turnpike addresses them. The staff can offer our opinion about them, but we need you to be offering those directly to the Turnpike staff. So I don't mean to cut you off, Ron, but I just want to make sure we're focusing the conversation the way we need to focus it.
So with this, if somebody's going west on 10th Street, okay, will they be able to go north on the Turnpike? Or are they putting in a 40-foot?
So just so, you know, I think it's important to say that this particular project and this particular interchange is the one that we actually have the least amount of information on. So these questions are good questions, but, and we will be in the back of the room, available in the back of the room to talk in more detail, but let's kind of spread the questions around because I know that we're spending a lot of time on one topic. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
Sorry.
On the Turnpike Widening, if you're adding 4 lanes to 6 lanes, it seems that you're going to virtually double the size of the width of the turnpike. So do we know if is the turnpike's going to have adequate right-of-way to do that, or are they proposing to take private land, and how much land are they proposing to take?
So the question was, does the Turnpike have enough right-of-way in order to perform the widening that is being proposed? And just to clarify, it's going from 6 lanes to 10 lanes, existing 6 lanes to 10 lanes. And what they're showing in their alternative, the reason why they're shifting it to the west, it is up to the right-of-way line. But again, as Scott and Sheila had mentioned, these are excellent questions to pose towards the DOT Turnpike design team, saying, how come we're not equally distributing the project from the center line out? So, excellent question. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I may have not heard it, because I'm having a lot of trouble hearing all this. Can they give a reason why they shifted from split to putting everything on the Windmill Wall? And I think it's going to be much closer than you seem to show you. But have they given a reason for doing that instead of splitting it?
Sure, I can take that one. So we've had excellent question, and we keep asking that question. The reason that they have said they're shifting entirely. So the question is, why is the Turnpike shifting everything to the west? Not splitting the road improvements on both sides of the. Traditionally, when you expand roads, you go on both sides or you go to the inside. It's very rare that you shift a road to the west or to the east. In this instance, those 2 red lines on this graphic are the gas pipelines, and they believe that it is fiscally irresponsible and impractical to move those gas lines, and therefore they cannot build in that area. So the proposal is to build right up to the right-of-way line. And if you're familiar with the area, there's a drainage ditch along the back. That would be filled in, and the road would come almost right up to where that chain link fence exists today. So that's the proposal that is the preferred alternative because of, in the FDOT's opinion, they cannot move the gas line. So there are several alternatives. One, work with the gas company to determine whether some of the gas line can be encroached upon or relocated. 2, narrow the roadway section to 8 lanes, which would still accommodate the noise wall. Or 3, move the gas line. So we're working on all those alternatives.
And that gets done. It's not like that's an anomaly to move a gas line.
Right.
Okay. Now,
It's expensive.
I couldn't hear what those red lines is.
Yeah, those are the gas pipe transmission pipelines.
Thanks for the clarity.
Yes, ma'am.
Is our neighboring city, Coral Springs, at the table or helping you in any part, because they have 2 major developments going up in the future, which those residents and then the people visiting, what they're building will be impacting Sample Road?
We have been coordinating through the MPO, not specifically with Coral Springs, but with all of the adjacent communities. And I think if you'll flip back, there was earlier graphic that showed all of the projects. We focused tonight on 2 projects, but you'll see the Sawgrass Expressway is proposed. You see the purple, number 6 and number 5, and then you see the interchange that we talked about in the teal. Those are all projects that are under consideration by the Turnpike or the Sawgrass Expressway Authority, and they're kind of sandwiching us in the middle. That's a concern. We want to make sure that we're engaged in all of these projects so that it's not a domino effect, that because somebody upstream approved something that forces us to stomach it. Part of the reason why we're so engaged in this process is because we learned from our neighbor, the city of Deerfield Beach. They got very engaged in the 10th Street connection. That project was killed for over 20 years, and now it's come back, it's been redesigned, and for the most part, the city's happy with it. So our efforts tonight are, we're playing the long game, are to be engaged and educated so that when they come forward, we get the best project possible.
Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Just quickly, I know you mentioned that the next meeting will be sometime in the first quarter of next year. And you know the date that we have heard the possible location. The last one was the date, you get any idea where it might be?
So, excellent question. She was wondering about the date, time, and location of future public open house meetings for either Project 1, the Turnpike Widening, or Project 2, the Sawgrass Turnpike Interchange project. That information has not been posted yet, but as Scott had mentioned, what we can do to stay informed is we'll continue to update, and as that information becomes available, we're certainly going to make that available at every platform that we can here.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so you mentioned with putting all 4 new lanes on our side, you're going to fill in the drainage on that side. Is that going to pose flooding issues for the Turnpike and for Windmore? You're eliminating major drainage between the existing Turnpike and Windmore.
We gotta make that work somewhere.
So the DOT will be responsible for relocating the drainage to wherever they need to drain it. They'll do all the engineering calculations. But we all know that, drainage is a continuing problem. Those right now are drainage facilities for the Turnpike. They're not specifically for Windmore. They are responsible for engineering that they work. But we'll watch those plans and make sure they do.
Yes, ma'am.
I came in a little late. If these, and how they're numbered, are they numbered in the time frame that they're going to happen?
No.
So
No.
are they, like Sawgrass and Turnpike are going to be working on it at the same time? It would be an alternative route for me to take Sawgrass and I need to go. The Turnpike is under construction.
So, projects.
Can you repeat the question, Mike?
Yeah. She wanted to know if the listing that we had was any sequence of construction that might be planned from either the Sawgrass or the Turnpike. The answer is no. Projects 1 and 2 were our priority to discuss for tonight's agenda, so they're listed as 1 and 2. Actually, Project 3 will be going under construction first, the Southwest 10th Street connector. That's a massive project, something in the order of 5 to 6 years to complete. Sawgrass Widening, the 2 segments shown, that's probably going to happen next, and then the connection to I-95 as part of the Southwest 10th Street Connector project would somewhere be in the sequence of construction. The Turnpike, as Scott had mentioned, we had talked about, is unfunded right now, so there is no construction schedule for the Sawgrass Interchange, project number 2, or the Turnpike Widening, project number 1. The 2 projects that we wanted to really focus on regarding tonight. But as that information becomes available, again, it's part of the open house, part of the public process, we will know more information as we move forward.
I guess what's the projected, because you said they're not even funded, are we looking at 2024, 2027? Like when do we think these major undertakings will take place? Since you said it took years to get the Deerfield 10th Street thing to happen. I mean, we might count, I mean, I know you had like kind of like things that went to 2024, like finalizing studies, but where are these going to actually, when you start making
So regarding the Turnpike and the Sawgrass, her question was, when is staff's idea of when these projects might start, correct? Yes, okay. Feasibly, potentially, they could be within the next 3 to 5 years. As they go through back to the MPO, they're going to get reprioritized, and they're going to get re-ranked, right? So they're going to go up the ranking list, right? And they're going to become a higher priority. These are large-scale regional transportation projects for Broward County. We're not talking about a local road. We're talking about hurricane evacuation routes. We're talking about a whole number of other things. So this is going to go up the list. But again, that remains to be seen exactly when that target date is. The Southwest 10th Street connector, it's been talked about for such a long time. That project is somewhat unique. It's had a lot of political baggage. There's been a number of things that have been tied to that project that have delayed it, transformed it. You know, it's a little bit of a unique scenario in itself. So not every project is like Southwest 10th Street connector. But anybody else? We're here to answer any additional questions. Yes, sir.
Yes, a question about the widening to the west. So they talk about for project 1. Does that spill into project 2 as well? Is that one big long stretch?
Yes. So the question is, does project 1 spill into project 2? So actually, if you look at the map, we're covering everything from south of 595 regarding the Turnpike Widening. And this continues all the way through the city limits well into Palm Beach County. So the widening project goes past the Sawgrass, past the city limits, past the county limits, into Palm Beach County for the Turnpike widening efforts in different phases. And we're focusing tonight on a phase that is important to the city, but this is the first phase that they're showing us of what's coming forward. Yes?
In what year were the gas lines in our particular area laid?
In what year were the gas lines in our area installed? 19...
I don't know the answer to that.
What I'm trying to get at is, were they installed after some of this planning took place?
No, they've been in the ground for some time. So the question was, when was the gas lines installed? And who came in first, right? So, yes, sir.
Is there a discussion or is there another project north of Wildboro?
Yes.
What does that look like? Where is that on the tank?
So the question is there another project north of Wiles Road? And the answer is yes. It's in an early stage of the planning process, right? It involves other counties and MPOs, right? In Palm Beach County, it's called the Transportation Planning Agency. So from what we've seen, they have a dual 8-lane section, and I've seen a 10-lane section for that segment of the Turnpike. But the gas main issue is not as relevant in that area because of the communities that front that certain segment of the western side of the Turnpike are not like Sunshine Drive, Winmore, South Creek, right up against the Turnpike. So it's a little bit different condition up there, and the gas main conditions change a little bit north of us. But to answer your question, from Wiles all the way to the county limit, there is a second phase of the Turnpike expansion happening in that zone. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
If project 3, 4, and 5 all get funded and they're all going to, everybody says yes to those, doesn't it kind of put us in a position where we have to say yes at that point? And if we don't address 5 before 2 and 1, because I think this is that was already further along. We don't have to worry about that one first. So we can stop it moving forward, because then we'll be sandwiched with the 2 projects. Then we have to say yes because it's already been expanded, and then we'll be tracking. Otherwise, we can do so much around us.
I'll try to address that, and that's why I wanted to go back to this graphic. You're hitting it dead on. Her question is, do we need to focus on 5, 2, 3, and 4? Aren't these projects all coming together and going to force us into an approval for the section along Coconut Creek? The design team has said each of these projects stands independently. I don't think that we actually agree with that. And your question earlier about the section north into Palm Beach County, which is currently proposed as 10 lanes, is very concerning. One of the current traffic analysis shows that from 595 to Atlantic, 10 lanes is warranted, but currently from Atlantic north to Wiles, only 8 lanes is warranted. So what we're doing is talking about the nuances of defining a project that works the best for Coconut Creek and minimizes the impacts. We know there are going to be construction projects. That 10th Street project is going on right now. We're watching each of those details and trying to make sure that things that are, I mean, in my humble opinion, the idea of a Texas U-turn that accommodates truck traffic coming off of 10th Street at our beautifully new paved Lyons Road intersection is horrendous. Those kind of things, we're drilling in to try to address those details. But each of these projects has the potential of expanding traffic, and it's focused on single occupancy vehicles. So it's not focused on transit, it's not focused on pedestrian access, it's not providing bike lanes, it's not moving in that smart growth direction that we keep talking about. So those are the things that we hope that you'll help us focus the Turnpike on. You know, the idea that we need to make these areas walkable and keep people using, you know, fewer cars. Sorry for being long-winded. Greg, sorry. I got
First, I just want to say thank you so much for doing this, because I too have been following this, and I know you have a horrendous task of keeping the information current. I think you've been very nice not to talk about the bad parts of this, including the cost, including the length of time. That construction would take 5 years. 80% of that time would be during the day, so 20% of the time would be at night. You also don't talk about the fact that I think this is a deliberate plan, as everyone's noticing, that they would have 10 lanes to the south of us, 10 lanes to the north of us, and then, yes, make sure that we have to agree. So I really do appreciate you making sure that we are engaged in this process, because if we're not, they will actually build this, and it will not be to the benefit of Coconut Creek. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Greg.
So we are actually at the 6:30 mark. We are going to be in the back of the room for a little while, and you can still ask questions of these two walking encyclopedias. Hey, and don't forget, I got to do a little promo. Get your sunglasses in the back of the room. That is our giveaway. Thank you guys.
Very nice.